Okay, let's do this. Do this. And welcome everyone. And we'll start off, of course, with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu sok b'divrei Torah. Okay, and just check to make sure you need to be on mute. I'm hearing some feedback, so if you are not on mute, just check it out. All right, and of course, if you have a question, you can either raise your hand or come off mute, however you want to do that. All right. So we are looking at this. We actually did a couple of these Torah Temimahs yesterday. This is the book says Sefer Toldot Adam, etc. Bayom baro Elohim Adam bidmut Elohim asa oto. Right, on the day that God created man, he made him in the image of God. Right, and then it goes on to say Zachar unekeva bara'am, male and female, he created them. Vayvarech otam, and he blessed them. Vayikra et shmam Adam, and he called their name Adam. Vayom hibaram, on the day that he created them. Okay. So, Zachar unekeva bara'am, male and female, he created them. Adam, right? Rabbi Abahu Rami. Rabbi Abahu raised a contradiction. The word Rami literally means to throw, and it has to do with throwing one verse against another verse. This expression is used in the Talmud to indicate a contradiction, and that is going to be raised, and you're going to see what this contradiction is. Ketiv, it's written, Zachar unekeva bar'am. It says, male and female, he created them. Uchtiv ki b'tzelem Elohim asa et ha'adam. It says, for in the image of God, he made the man. Right? So, here. Okay. So, let's take a look. That seems to suggest something. Ha ketzad, how is this possible? And just to explain a little bit better, the halashon zachar unkeva bar'am, because the expression male and female, he created them, mashma implies the metchilat briatam, from the very beginning of their creation, trei havu, there were two of them. So that's the contradiction. And then it's singular, right? Also, but chila, initially, Allah b'machshava livro shnayim. It occurred to God, right? God intended to create two. That was what he thought of doing to begin with. Ulevasof, but in the end, lo nivra el achad, he only created one. So that's what the text is implying. Let's take a look at Torah Temimah. But Eruvin Yud Chet Bet, in the tractate Eruvin 18b, Huva be'inyan zeh, it's brought up in connection with this subject, a pasuk, that verse, Ki betzelem Elohim asa et ha'adam, for in the image of God he made man. Now he's saying that is Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 27. And you notice that I've made a note here myself, because I went back to this verse, right? Trust but verify. And I'm going to take you now, I'm going to do my best to take you, if this will work. Maybe it won't. Let's see. There it is. Go back there. There's the bookmark. So there we go. This is verse 27. Let's go back. Chapter 1, verse 27. 27, right? Okay, sorry, that's the Aramaic. Vayivra Elohim, God created et Adam, Betzamo, in his image. Betzelem Elohim bara oto, and it says, in the image of God, he created him, right? Bara oto. And then it says, Zachar u'nekeva bara otam, male and female, he created them. Now that's back there, one 27, right? Is that just to be double checking? Yes, 27. Now going to where we are, and look at what it says, right? It says, here we are. Let me find it. Is this right here? Yeah, it says asa et ha'adam, but it doesn't say that. It says bara. So this citation here, 127, seems to suggest that this is part of that verse. I didn't see it. I didn't see it. I saw bara oto. Right? I mean, it means pretty much the same thing, but even so, it's interesting. The citation isn't accurate. Uvektubot chet aleph, and then the tractate Ketuvot, page 8a, huva bepasuk, it's brought, or the verse is cited, vayavra Elohim et Adam betzamo, right? And God created man in his image. Let's go back and just, it says sham, which means ibid, right? So in other words, it should be in that verse. So let's make sure, right? Here. Tzelem bara'oto. There it is, bara'oto. Let's make sure it's uzachar keva bara'otam. And it doesn't go on with anything else. That's it, right? Because then it says he blessed them. Just interesting. I was really struggling to make sure that I was understanding what was going on, and I was finding these inconsistencies, right? So let's see. Here we go. Yeah, right. It hadam but somewhat. I don't. It. Yeah, right. Ve'ein nafka mina b'tziyunei hamikraot. He says, but there isn't any practical halachic difference between these two citations, right? Essentially, it says the same thing, right? It's saying the same thing. Ve'ien masha katuv la'el b'pasuk ha'inizkar, and he says, and look and see what is mentioned regarding the verse that was cited. That is the verse in Genesis 1:27. And there is some interesting stuff there. So we can go back and take a look at what it says there. Let's go back. So here we are. Let's see here. Amar Rabbi. Let me make sure I've got it. Yeah, here it is. Look, it looks like exactly the same thing, right? And here he's quoting. I'm going to check. Here it says Ketuvot Chet Aleph. Remember, he said Ketuvot 8a, and it's the same statement. Rav Yehuda Rami, Ketiv Betzim Elohim Bara Oto. It says in the image of God he created him. Uchtiv Zachar Nekeva Bara Otam, and then it says male and female he created them. Ha Ketzad, how is this possible? But Chila Allah b'machshava livro shnayim. Originally, it occurred to God to create two. Ulevasof nivra echad, and in the end, he just created one. Right, so that's essentially the comment we just had today. And I just want to double check the citation because this is Ketuvot 8a. Let's just double check and see. Hold on a second and see what he says, if it's the same one. Okay, look at that. It's a different citation. Interesting. So he's making the distinction between, we're digging deep here, or relatively deep here, to point that out, right? So similar comment, different citations. Let's go back. He says we should look and see what's written over there. Okay. Let's go back and see. Okay, give me a second. It is 21. Here it is. Here, or rather, Samach Aleph. 61. Ritzono lomar. So what he means to say is, Batchila Allah b'machshava livro shnei gufim. And so basically the same thing, right? He thought to create two different bodies, meyuchadim, right? Individual, separate bodies. Ulevasof, but in the end, nivra guf echad. He created one body, umimenu bara et haisha, and from this body he created the woman. By the way, the question that's running through my mind is the significance of this particular interpretation. In other words, excuse me, There's a certain image involved in God creating two separate bodies and now creating one with Eve coming. And you know that, of course, you may be familiar with the Lilith story. That would refer then, there must be an interpretation that suggests that God actually did create two separate bodies, and that female body was Lilith, right? But ultimately, Eve and Adam. And of course, the significance of Adam and Eve being created from one body, and the idea of what does that hold out in terms of its metaphoric meaning, etc. Anyway, let's go on. V'yein brachot samach aleph aleph, right? So that's a citation that I believe he just made, that we just read, right, for today's passage. Ve'eruvin yud bet and Eruvin, page 18b, shinui nischaot, a difference in the texts, right, in the versions of the text, be'inyan zeh, in regarding this matter, vayuval kaman hey bet, that's what we're referring to, Genesis 5, verse 2. It's going to be brought later on. Uvagamar kan, and in the Gemara here in Brachot, mevu'ar nafka mina, there is a clarification of a halachic difference, bidrasha zo, regarding this particular interpretation, the inyan birkat chatanim, right? In other words, the fact that God had in mind initially to create two and then ultimately created one, and it has a halachic significance with regard to the marriage ceremony and the brachot that are said, the blessings that are said at the wedding ceremony. Here we go. He's going to explain. The im nezal batar machshava shetiyena shtei yitzirot, because if we're going to actually follow God's intention that there should be actually two acts of formation, right? Tzarich levarech bivrachat chachamim, it would be obligated to say in the formula of the blessing of the grooms, okay, birchat chatanim levad, right? In other words, one should say separately, birkat asher yatzar et ha'adam betzamo, that brecha that says, who formed man in his image. Od bracha, Yotzer Ha'adam, we need to have another bracha that says, who created man, just simply Yotzer Ha'adam, right? Remez, an allusion, the Yetzirat Chava, to suggest the creation of Eve, right? So he is not citing this Lilith theme at all, right? Al Shem Hakatuv, right? Sorry, Iyen Sham Hakatuv, Hey Bet. In other words, look there, what's written with regard to Genesis chapter 5, verse 2. Zachar unkeva bar am, male and female, he created them. Vayikra et shmam Adam, and he called them Adam. So he created them male and female and called their name Adam. The idea of both male and female being Adam, v'chein kaimalam, and in fact, that is the way we do it. We in fact follow that idea in the Birkat Chatanim at a wedding ceremony. We're going to go back now to our present verse. Okay. Let's make sure we've got everything that I took care of, everything that we needed. I believe that I did. Okay, yeah, all right. Let's keep going. Zachar u'nekeva bar-am. Male and female, he created them. Ma'aseh betalma hamelech, it's told regarding Ptolemy the king, shekines ayin bet zakenim. We've had this idea before, that he brought together 72 elders, vehichnisan be'ayin bet batim, and he put them into 72 houses. Each one was put into a separate house, 72 of them. V'amar l'chol echad, and he said to everyone, Kitvu li Torat Moshe Rabchem, write for me the Torah of Moses, your teacher, your master. In other words, this is, of course, the Septuagint, the story behind the Septuagint, the translation of the Hebrew into Greek. Natan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eitzah B'lev Kol Echad. The Holy One, blessed be He, gave an advice into the heart of each and every one. Echad Kol Echad Ve'echad. Ve'hiskimu kulam, and they all agreed, L'dat achat, to form one opinion, even though they couldn't talk to each other, right? Ve'katvu lo, and they wrote for him in the Greek, Zachar u'nekeva bar o, right? He says they wrote male and female. He or bar u, maybe bar u, meaning he created them. So the idea here, we'll see, the idea is that it could have been understood to mean more than one God. And there's the idea, this is mentioned elsewhere, that what Ptolemy was trying to do was to be able to show that there were contradictions in the Torah regarding here, especially the idea of one God. So that's why they changed the text. It's an explanation as to why in the translation, the text is not translated literally. Let's take a look. The Bar'am, right, because he created them, mashma shnei gufin bara kol echad. Okay, so again, let's take a look. I want to make sure, just to double check. Oh, okay. Sorry, I prepare, but then I forget. So nekeva bar o is how we have to read this. This doesn't have any vowels, so that's what it is. So in other words, male and female, he created him. Important distinction, important mistake to catch, right? So they wrote, and so it isn't here about more than one God. It is the idea that they were created separately here. Okay, so they wrote male and female. He created him. Let's keep going here. Let's go down here. So thank you. Right. So, right. Good that I was able to catch that. Okay, so the word Bar'am mashmash negufin, the idea that he created two different bodies, just as we were discussing above. Bara kol echad zachar ve'unakeva. He made each one male, one female. Ve'iyen b'Yerushalmi, and check out in the Yerushalmi, Megillah, tractate Megillah, Perik Aleph, chapter 1, Halacha Tet. Remember, that's the way the Yerushalmi is divided up. Uva Pirish Kurban Eda, and the Kurban Eda is the name of one of the commentators on the Yerushalmi, right? Udvarav Tzarich, and he says you have to look carefully at what he wrote. He doesn't go into it, okay? Doesn't go into it at all. He just gives it as a reference. So this is a little bit beyond my own wheelhouse, but just to let you know. Yes, David.
So I think we've gone through this before, but I mean, what about the hermaphrodite, aspect of this, right? I mean, haven't we talked about this before? Because
we
I
did.
thought that was part of this meaning, right? Was, male and female, but then him means basically implying that Adam or was a hermaphrodite. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it's too early in the morning for me to stumble over syllables, but yeah. Anyway, that's my question.
Yes, we did do that. We did discuss that. But remember, even created as an hermaphrodite, it requires one body, right? If that is the point you're trying to bring out.
Well, yeah, and also the passage about him and her, but then only him. To me,
Yes.
would imply it is one body, but wasn't. Yeah, it was still him and her, but all within one body, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Bar'am would mean two bodies,
right.
right? He created them.
Yeah,
Right? So that's the idea. And of course, the idea of a male and female created from one body is the idea. I think perhaps some of the thought behind this is the fact that although there is a, a, a very significant difference physically between men and women, between males and females, nevertheless, they come together. The idea is that They are two in one. So, and of course, you can meditate on where we go with that. Keeping going on with this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just thanks.
No, I'm glad you brought it up. Uvedvar tchunat zeh hamelech Talmai, in regards to this characteristic of Talmai, of Talmi, the kavanato, and his intention, v'ha'atakat haTorah, right, and his and the translation of the Torah. Be'arnu, we've already explained. Berosh Perek Bereshit. It's one of the very first comments of Torah Temimah on Bereshit, on Genesis, Yuyan Sham. Check it out there. We're not going to do it. You can go back and see in terms of that, but we aren't going to do it today. Let's try and do a little bit more. Excuse me. Zachar Nekeva Bar'am, right? Male and female, he created them. Tani, so right, we've got an early reference here, Mishnah, from the times of the Mishnah prior to the year 200. Beit Hillel Omrim, the school of Hillel, are of the opinion, Lo yivatel adam mi piria verivia, a individual should not stop trying to procreate, ela im ken yeshlo banim zachar unekeva, unless he has children, male and female. In other words, he has to keep trying to procreate until he winds up with at least one male and one female. Shne'emar, why? Zachar unkeva baram, male and female, he created them. And this is in Yevamot, and that's so it's saying. We have an obligation to procreate. According to Beit Hillel, we have an obligation to procreate male and female until we have both. Right? So let's see. There we go. Let's take a look. Here we are. Here. V'da'at Beit Shammai, so we mentioned Beit Hillel. What about Beit Shammai? Deva'inan shnei zacharim, that he requires you to have two males. Two males. Why does he require? In other words, if you have girls, you have to just keep having, or a girl and a boy, you just have to keep trying to procreate until you have two males, according to Beit Shammai. All right. De'alfinan, he learns it out, Moshe, from Moses, Dehayulo shnei banim zacharim, because Moses had two male children, right, two sons. So just like Moses, we have to keep doing. Jews have to do it. Eliezer and Gershom. So Eliezer and Gershom are the names of Moses' two children. Upiresh min ha'isha, and then we read how he no longer, this has to do with the story of Miriam, etc., where Aaron and Miriam come to Moses, and he no longer was having personal relations with Zipporah anymore, after he had his two sons. Umi pishtut lashon haGemara, and from the plain sense of the language of the Gemara, mashma, it would imply the Beit Hillel Sverale, that according to Beit Hillel, Zachar unekeva davka. In other words, it has to be male and female. In other words, if you have two boys, if you have two girls, you have to keep doing it until you have at least one boy and one girl. Avalo shnei zacharim, he says, but not two males. Ukedamashma mil lishonam, okay, and from the implication of this, of what they're saying, let's keep going, yalfim bebriato shel, okay, and they get it out of the world, right, the creation of the world. That's where they got this position. V'hainu mishum demehem totzaot letoldot bnei adam, and not only that, that's because from having a boy and a girl, you can now have generations, right? You can now procreate from a male and a female. And that's all part of Beit Hillel's argumentation. However, aval, the Yerushalmi kan, but in the Jerusalem Talmud here, in this particular similar place, Perik Hey, chapter 5, halacha vav, halacha 6. Mevu'ar, it's clarified there. The Beit Hillel makilin. They actually have a more lenient opinion than Beit Shammai. The Sagi B'schar Unakeva, because they say it's enough, it's sufficient to have a male and a female. In other words, they're saying it's not that you have to have two males. It's okay if you have a male and a female, essentially two children. Okay. Now, obviously, however, when you have two girls, they probably, I would have to assume, are saying that you'd have to keep on trying until you have a boy. But anyway, not two males. Mashma, so that implies the kol shekain should die b'shnei zachim. So since it's saying it's enough to have a male and a female, the implication is that it's all the more so it's okay. You fulfilled your obligation with two males. Umashira'aha Yerushalmi, and the fact that the Yerushalmi felt it was important to say lefaresh kain, to explain Beit Hillel's position in this way. Umishum, the reason is the im lo hachi, that if this is not the case, halo havu Beit Shammai mekilim. In that case, you might say that Beit Shammai has a more lenient opinion than Beit Hillel, right? Because Beit Shammai is saying, well, if you have two males, you fulfilled it. But on the other hand, if Beit Shammai is saying, if you have two males, that's okay. But according to Beit Hillel, right, you would have to have a male and a female, right, as well. But imkain, and if this is the case, halo hava lemitne, if this were the case, that Beit Shammai were in fact more lenient than Beit Hillel, halo hava lemitne pluktatam zot, they would have to teach, they would have to mention this particular disagreement of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, b'Masechet Ediyot, in the tractate Ediyot, bein kule Beit Shammai v'chumrei Beit Hillel. So in the Masechet Ediyot, there is a section that talks about those situations where Beit Shammai is more lenient than Beit Hillel, and it's not mentioned there, right? And so that's another reason why Yerushalmi has to say what they're saying to make sure that Beit Hillel is more lenient than Beit Shammai. Zohi kavanat Rashi Khan, and that appears to be the intention of Rashi Khan. That is to say, in where he's citing what we were doing, right? This is the citation here in Yevamot, right? So in Rashi's commentary in Yevamot on page 61b, right? Find the place. Forgive me. Sorry. Let me find it. Sorry. Yeah, here we are, Rashi Khan. Shekatav b'divrei Beit Shammai shnei zacharim. He wrote regarding Beit Shammai's needs, it requires two males. Aval, he said regarding that, aval lo zachar unakeva, and he points out that Beit Shammai does not have a male and a female. Ad kan l'shono. That's the end of his quote. Bahu Yerushalmi, and this follows the Yerushalmi's opinion. Umashitafas lefaresh Yerushalmi, and the fact that Rashi decided to interpret things the way the Yerushalmi interprets it, Tzarich lomar, we would have to say, Mishum de Bavli, because in the Babylonian Talmud, Ein Ha'iyan Mevurar, because it's not explained there, it's not clarified in the Bavli, V'samchinan Yerushalmi, and in fact, we hold like the Yerushalmi. We rely on the Yerushalmi. But Omnan, the Dina, so it seems to be saying, but in fact, right, however, in Dina, I think he's talking about, in terms of the halacha, katfu haposkim, the ones who decide, the decisors of halacha wrote, kafi hamashma'ut bavli. They follow the interpretation in the Bavli, interestingly enough, B'divrei Beit Hillel, regarding Beit Hillel's opinion. In other words, that Beit Hillel is saying having two males isn't enough, it must be a male and a female. V'yein be'Evan HaEzer, and this is the book in the Shulchan Aruch, the section Evan HaEzer, Siman Aleph, so that would be chapter 1, Seif Hey, V'tzarich Yun, the sub-paragraph 5, V'tzarich Yun, he says, this requires further investigation. And with this, we will conclude. Share. Okay. Any comments? Yes, Harlan, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I have two females, and what's wrong with that? You have Sarah and Rachel. They were there helping out, and they were wonderful people. I mean, what's wrong with the females? I can't figure that one out.
Okay. So, Harlan, this really represents, Middle Eastern values. So, for example, I had read a book about Arab culture, very male dominated. It's not unusual. And remember, it's also reflecting the time period and the values at that particular time. So, what can I tell you? This is something that I'm not going to necessarily defend. It just is the way it is, and I present it the way it is. And at this point, I think people understand. You have to take that into account. So they're just, again, I guess, the most positive thing I can get out of it is they are trying to find ways that the Torah is suggesting that we behave. They're finding ways in which to interpret and understand the Torah to make sure that as human beings we are performing divine will. Okay. But yeah, it is what it is. And it's a whole subject, right? The whole issue of, the emphasis on the male and things like that. It's a big subject. Not one that I feel really competent at dealing with. All right. I'm going to stop the recording.